What if the ultimate prize becomes the most dangerous trap? What if achieving everything you ever wanted transforms into losing everything that ever mattered? Our journey began in chains. An Irish thrall, learning that survival meant swallowing pride while secretly planning freedom. From slavery came farming, the desperate gamble of a freed tenant working volcanic soil that seemed cursed to fail. Success in agriculture led to trading, the merchant's burden of protecting wealth that makes every stranger a potential enemy. Trading profits bought land and status, the warrior's honor purchased with other men's labor. 30 days defending what violence had won taught bitter lessons about how quickly enemies multiply when power grows too visible, how courage means nothing when outnumbered by those who prefer patient plotting to honorable combat. And now we wear the crown itself. 30 days as chieftain will test everything we learned during our climb from the bottom. But crowns are heavy, and the higher you rise, the farther you can fall. Power corrupts not just those who wield it, but everyone around them. Trust becomes a luxury no leader can afford. Family becomes liability. Friends become enemies wearing familiar faces. What awaits at the summit of ambition? What price must be paid for absolute authority over others? Can anyone rule wisely when ruling itself transforms the ruler into something their former self would barely recognize? Tonight we discover that sometimes the only way to find peace is to lose everything, that wisdom comes not from climbing higher, but from learning when to let go. Close your eyes and prepare to fall from the greatest height of all, only to discover that the bottom might be exactly where you were meant to land. The poisoned dawn. You wake as chieftain to the stench of rotting flesh beside you in what should have been your triumph bed. The corpse of Einar the Grey-Beard lies twisted in death agony, his purple-black tongue protruding like a dog's in summer heat. His eyes bulge from their sockets, while flies buzz around the foam that dried on his blue lips during the night. The poison was meant for you. The realization hits like an ice-cold wave as you notice the second cup beside the bed, still half filled with honeyed mead that would have been your victory drink. Einar must have sampled your cup in his drunken celebration, dying the death that your enemies planned for their new chieftain. Your hands shake as you examine the corpse that was left as a message. Someone entered your private chambers while you slept and arranged this grotesque welcome to power. The placement is too deliberate to be coincidence. They want you to know that nowhere is safe. The dead chieftain's skin has taken on the mottled purple-grey of advanced decay, his body swollen with the gases of death. Maggots already writhe in the corners of his eyes and nose. The sight turns your stomach, but you force yourself to look closely for clues about who could have orchestrated this macabre warning. Blood has pooled beneath his head, where it struck the wooden bed frame during his convulsions. The crimson stain has darkened to brown, telling you this happened hours ago while you slept deeply from exhaustion. Your enemies moved with practiced silence through halls that should have been guarded by loyal men. The implications crashed down like an avalanche. Half your household must be compromised for assassins to move so freely. The guards you trusted with your life either participated in the plot or died trying to prevent it. Every face you see today could belong to someone who wants you dead. You hear footsteps approaching in the corridor outside. Your hand instinctively reaches for the knife at your belt as you realize the discovery of the corpse will mark the beginning of your real battle for survival. They're coming to check if their trap worked, expecting to find two bodies instead of one. The door handle turns with agonizing slowness. Morning light creeps through the window slats, illuminating the horror scene that greets whoever enters. You grip your blade tighter, knowing that the next few moments will determine whether you die like Einar or begin fighting back against the conspiracy that extends deeper than you ever imagined. A young thrall girl pushes through the doorway carrying water and clean linens for your morning wash. Her scream pierces the dawn silence when she sees the decomposing chieftain beside your bed. The sound will bring others running, starting a day that will test every survival instinct you learned, climbing from slave to lord. Your reign as chieftain begins not with ceremony or celebration, but with death, treachery, and the certain knowledge that enemies surround you on all sides. The crown you fought so hard to claim may prove to be nothing more than an elaborate trap designed to destroy you more completely than simple murder ever could. The cook's betrayal. The morning meal arrives carried by Helga Irontooth, the cook who has served 3 chieftains before you, with apparent loyalty that now seems as false as a spring thaw. Her weathered hands place the wooden bowl before you with the same care she has shown for decades, but something in her eyes warns of danger that your exhausted mind struggles to identify. The porridge steams with barley and dried meat, looking identical to countless meals you have eaten in this hall. Your stomach growls with hunger that makes the simple food appear delicious despite the horror of finding Einar's corpse. You lift the carved spoon toward your mouth while Helga watches with unusual intensity. The first taste burns your tongue with heat that seems normal for freshly cooked grain. But the second spoonful brings a bitter aftertaste that makes your throat constrict with instinctive revulsion. Your body recognizes poison before your mind accepts the betrayal of someone you trusted with your daily bread for years. You spit the porridge onto the floor while Helga's face transforms from feigned concern to disappointment that her second attempt at assassination has failed. Her gnarled fingers grip a small leather pouch that must contain the same poison that killed Einar, confirming that yesterday's attempt was merely the opening move in a larger conspiracy. "Who pays you for this treachery?" you demand, while grabbing her wrist with enough force to crack old bones. The pouch falls from her grasp, spilling white powder that hisses when it touches the wet stone floor. The sound tells you how close you came to joining Einar in death. Her confession comes in stammering words that reveal a web of betrayal extending through 3 rival clans and half your sworn household members. The silver they paid her represents more wealth than she could earn in 10 years of honest service. Your enemies understood that every person has a price, including those you considered family. The torture begins immediately in the hall where other servants can witness what happens to traitors. Her screams echo from the stone walls as heated iron extracts, names, meeting places, and planned timing for the broader assassination plot. Each revelation shows how thoroughly your enemies infiltrated your stronghold before you ever claimed the chieftain's seat. Ragnar Iron Fist, your trusted lieutenant, arranged safe passage for the assassins. Thorstein the Wise, your advisor on legal matters, provided intelligence about your routines and vulnerabilities. Even young Bjorn Cupbearer, who you treated like a son, accepted silver to ensure your drinks would be properly poisoned when the time came. The list of betrayers includes warriors who swore blood oaths to die for you, jarls who bent the knee in apparent submission, and servants who smiled while planning your death. The conspiracy reaches so deep that you begin to wonder if anyone in your hall remains loyal to the chieftain they helped create. Helga dies badly, as traitors should, but her death provides crucial intelligence about enemy plans that extend beyond simple murder. They want your realm divided, your allies scattered, and your followers convinced that challenging established power brings only death and suffering to those foolish enough to attempt change. The kitchen becomes a battlefield as you realize that every meal, every drink, every morsel that passes your lips represents a potential death sentence. Your enemies have turned the most basic necessity of life into a weapon, forcing you to view nourishment as another form of combat in a war where trust has become impossible. The Althing eruption. The assembly of chieftains convenes at dawn with the ritual blowing of horns that should announce legal proceedings. But the gathered jarls arrive with hands on sword hilts and warriors positioned like an army preparing for battle rather than men seeking justice through ancient law. Thorvald's skull splitter, the high chieftain whose authority theoretically governs all others, takes his place on the carved wooden seat, while his eyes catalogue every face for signs of rebellion or weakness that could be exploited. His presence should ensure order, but you sense that even his power may not control what happens today. Your legal claim to chieftain status rests on having killed Einar in single combat according to traditional challenge law. But Sigurd Blackbeard rises to dispute your right, claiming the fight was murder disguised as honorable duel. His accusations carry the weight of 3 allied clans who nod agreement with his false testimony. The thrall-born pretender killed a drunken man who could barely hold his sword, Sigurd declares while warriors behind him shift closer to their weapons. The insult strikes at your slave origins, questioning whether someone born in chains can ever rightfully command free men through strength rather than treachery. Magnus Red Hair seconds the accusation, with details that sound convincing despite being complete fabrication. He claims to have witnessed you striking Einar from behind, then arranging the scene to appear like fair combat. The lies flow smoothly from his mouth, while allies murmur support for his version of events. The law speaker, ancient Olaf Silver-Tongue, attempts to maintain order by reciting precedents about combat challenges and rightful succession. But his voice wavers with fear as competing warriors edge closer to violence that could turn legal assembly into massacre. Traditional authority crumbles when men choose sword law over word law. Your own supporters, fewer than expected, call for trial by combat to settle the dispute, according to custom that cannot be questioned even by lying enemies. But Thorvald raises his hand for silence, his decision carrying more weight than any legal precedent when backed by superior force. Let the accused prove his worth against 3 champions chosen by his accusers. The High Chieftain declares with Solomon-like wisdom that actually ensures your death through legal combat that cannot be refused without admitting cowardice and forfeiting all claim to leadership. The first champion steps forward, Gunnar Iron Shield, whose reputation for killing opponents in single combat makes him a walking death sentence for anyone foolish enough to accept his challenge. His scarred face tells the story of dozens of duels that ended with enemy blood on his blade and another notch in his belt. Eric Wolfslayer volunteers as second champion, his massive frame and battle axe promising that even victory against Gunnar would leave you too wounded to survive a fresh opponent. The crowd murmurs appreciation for his eagerness to kill the upstart chieftain who dared rise above his slave-born station. The third champion waits to be chosen, but you already know that survival requires fighting 3 professional killers in succession while they remain fresh, and you accumulate wounds from each encounter. The legal framework disguises certain murder as honorable tradition that none can question without appearing to reject the law itself. Drawn swords glitter in morning light as the assembly transforms from legal proceeding into gladiatorial arena where your death will serve as entertainment for men who prefer the old order to any change that threatens their established positions. The Althing has become your execution ground. The Jarls test. Your sworn jarls gather in your great hall with faces that reveal nothing, while their hands rest casually on sword hilts that promise violence if your answers displease them. These men swore oaths of loyalty when your power seemed secure, but now they demand proof that following you won't lead to their own destruction. Hakon Blood Eagle speaks first, his scarred face reflecting years of battlefield survival that ended with land grants and comfortable halls. The other chieftains say you gained your seat through treachery and poison rather than honest steel, he declares while watching your reaction for signs of weakness or guilt. They claim the thrall-born cannot lead free men without bringing curse and dishonor upon all who serve him, adds Orm Irontooth, his words carrying the weight of traditional belief that blood determines worthiness more than ability or courage. The accusation strikes at the foundation of your authority among men who value breeding above achievement. Your response must convince them that loyalty to you offers better prospects than betrayal to your enemies. But their eyes hold the calculation of men weighing silver against honor, safety against oath-breaking, and survival against the uncertain rewards of following a controversial leader whose reign may end in disaster. Bjorn Wavewalker pounds his fist on the oak table with enough force to make the iron cups jump. Give us proof of your strength, or we choose new oaths with chieftains whose power doesn't rest on murder and poison, he demands, while his companions nod agreement with the ultimatum that reduces your options to demonstration or death. The test they propose involves single combat against champions of their choosing, each duel designed to prove your worthiness through victory or expose your weakness through defeat. The tradition sounds honorable, but actually serves their purpose of eliminating you legally while appearing to follow ancient custom rather than simple betrayal. Gunnar Skullcrusher volunteers to serve as first champion, his reputation for crushing opponents' heads with his bare hands making him a death sentence disguised as legal test. His massive frame and scarred knuckles tell the story of dozens of men who underestimated his strength and died screaming as their skulls cracked like eggs. The second champion steps forward before you can recover from the first challenge. Eric Blood Axe draws his massive two-handed weapon with casual ease that suggests years of practice in dismembering opponents who thought they could match his skill. His smile promises that your death will be neither quick nor clean. The third duel waits like a death sentence even if you somehow survive the first two trials. Your jarls watch with hungry anticipation as they realize that proving your strength requires surviving 3 professional killers in succession while they remain fresh and you accumulate wounds with each encounter. The hall fills with tension as you realize these men who swore to die for you now prefer watching you die for them. Their loyalty proved worthless when tested against fear of backing a losing leader whose enemies command superior force and political support. Your choice becomes simple. Fight 3 champions in succession with minimal chance of survival, or refuse the trials and forfeit all claim to leadership while marking yourself as a coward whose word cannot be trusted. Either path leads to destruction, but only one offers the possibility of taking enemies with you into death. The afternoon sun slants through the hall's windows as you prepare to face trials designed more for execution than evaluation. Your jarls arrange themselves like spectators at a gladiatorial show, their former loyalty transformed into morbid curiosity about how their chieftain will die. The grain store fires. The acrid smoke reaches your nostrils before the flames become visible, that distinctive bitter scent of burning grain that signals the destruction of your people's winter survival. Your heart sinks as you realize the enemy has struck at the foundation of your power by targeting the food stores that keep your followers fed and loyal. Running toward the storage buildings with your remaining warriors, you see orange flames licking through gaps in the timber walls, while desperate men throw water that seems to evaporate before reaching the fire. The systematic placement of the blazes tells you this was planned sabotage rather than accidental disaster. Enemy infiltrators worked through the night to ensure maximum destruction, using oil and tinder to create fires that spread too quickly for effective response. The coordination suggests inside knowledge of guard routines and building layouts that could only come from trusted members of your own household. Barrels of precious grain explode in showers of sparks as the fire reaches stores you accumulated through years of careful planning and trade negotiations. Each burning sack represents weeks of winter survival for families who depend on your leadership to keep them alive through the hungry months. The heat becomes so intense that you cannot approach close enough to organize effective firefighting efforts. Your face blisters from exposure to flames that consume months of labor and planning in minutes. The destruction serves multiple enemy purposes by eliminating your resources while demonstrating your inability to protect what matters most. Your people gather to watch their winter food disappear into smoke and ash, their faces showing the desperation of those who realize starvation now threatens every child and elder in your care. The enemy understood that destroying your grain stores would turn your own followers against you more effectively than any military defeat. Olaf Ironbeard points at the ruins with shaking hands while tears stream down his weathered cheeks. My grandchildren will starve because you cannot protect what we need to survive, he accuses, while other farmers nod agreement with his assessment of your failed leadership. The fire spreads to adjacent buildings despite frantic efforts to create fire breaks with axes and shovels. Your blacksmith shop burns next, taking irreplaceable tools and weapon-making capability with it. The systematic destruction suggests enemies who understand exactly which losses will cripple your ability to maintain power. Young mothers clutch their children while calculating how many meals remain in their personal stores before hunger begins claiming the weak and elderly. Their terrified faces reveal the mathematics of starvation that your enemies intended when they chose grain stores as their target. Water proves inadequate against fires designed to burn everything essential to your survival. The well-placed blazes consume not just grain, but also the tools, buildings, and infrastructure needed to rebuild what has been lost. Your enemies planned for complete destruction rather than temporary setback. The wind shifts, carrying smoke and embers toward the residential areas where your people live in growing terror of flames that could spread to their homes. The fire becomes a weapon that threatens everyone loyal to you while sparing those who support your enemies. By dawn, only smoldering ruins remain where your prosperity once stood. The destruction eliminates your ability to feed followers or trade for essential supplies. Your enemies achieve through arson what they could not accomplish through direct military assault. Brothers, blood rage. The war horns that shatter the morning silence carry a tune you recognize from childhood. The same melody your exiled brother Eric Snakeeye used to blow when calling you to hunt wild boar in the forests of your youth. Now those familiar notes promise death rather than shared adventure, as his berserker army crests the hill with foam-flecked mouths and blood-red eyes. Eric strides at their head, wearing bear pelts and iron rings that glitter in the dawn light, his transformation from beloved brother to deadly enemy complete after 3 years of exile for his attempt to poison your father. The warriors behind him move with the twitching, unnatural energy of men who have consumed mushroom potions and mead mixed with herbs that strip away fear and pain. Their howls fill the air with sounds more animal than human, voices raised in battle frenzy that announces their intention to die gloriously in combat rather than retreat from any enemy. The berserkers foam at the mouth while biting their shields, their eyes rolled back to show only white as the madness takes complete possession of their minds and bodies. Your brother raises his massive two-handed axe and points it directly at your hall while screaming challenges that mix childhood nicknames with promises of dismemberment. "Come out, little crow, and feed the ravens with your coward's blood," he roars while his men echo the war cry with voices that crack like breaking timber. The sight of 30 berserkers in full battle rage chills your remaining warriors to the bone, despite their oath to die for you. These are not normal soldiers who might retreat when wounded or show mercy to the defeated. Berserkers fight until death takes them, feeling no pain and showing no quarter to any living thing in their path. Eric's exile stemmed from his discovery that you were father's chosen heir rather than him, the older son who expected to inherit the chieftain's seat by birthright. His poisoning attempt failed, but the 3 years of wandering and gathering desperate men have transformed hurt pride into homicidal madness, focused entirely on destroying everything you've built. The berserkers begin their ritual preparation for battle by cutting themselves with knives and rubbing the wounds with salt and pine pitch. Their screams of self-inflicted agony tell you that pain means nothing to men who view death in combat as the highest honor possible for a Norse warrior seeking entrance to Valhalla's golden halls. Your brother's army carries no provisions or supplies, confirming that they came here to die fighting rather than conduct any kind of strategic campaign. Today will see either your death or theirs, with no possibility of negotiation or retreat for warriors who have already crossed the threshold between sanity and battle madness. The morning mist swirls around the berserkers as they work themselves into killing frenzy, their weapons gleaming with the oil they use to prevent blood from making sword grips slippery. Every detail of their preparation demonstrates professional competence despite their apparent madness, marking them as the most dangerous enemies you have ever faced. Your defenders number fewer than 20 men against 30 berserkers, led by someone who knows your hall's weaknesses and defensive positions. The mathematics of the coming battle suggest that survival requires either divine intervention or tactical brilliance that transforms disadvantage into victory through cunning rather than strength. The sun climbs higher while your brother's army completes their pre-battle rituals, each passing moment allowing the mushroom potions to take deeper effect. Soon they will be beyond all human reason, feeling no pain and fearing no death as they assault your walls with the unstoppable fury of natural disasters given human form. The night desertion. The first torches begin disappearing from your ramparts just after midnight, their flames moving away from your hall like fallen stars abandoning the sky. You watch from your tower window as sworn warriors slip away into darkness, taking their oaths and your silver with them, while leaving you to face the berserker assault with dwindling numbers. Gunnar Wolf Killer leads the largest group of deserters, his torch visible as he guides 8 men toward the forest path that will take them safely away from the coming slaughter. These are hardened warriors who swore blood oaths to die beside you, but fear of berserker fury proves stronger than any promise made in better times. The sound of horses being led quietly from the stable confirms that your cavalry has decided to abandon the hopeless defense. Without mounted warriors, you cannot pursue fleeing enemies or conduct the mobile warfare that might offset the berserker's advantage in close combat. Each departing horse represents tactical options lost forever. Magnus Ironbeard approaches you in the tower with downcast eyes and trembling hands that struggle to return the silver armring, marking his oath to your service. Lord, the men see only death in tomorrow's battle, he whispers while placing the ring on your table with the care of a man handling burial goods. 30 berserkers led by your own brother is not a battle but an execution, he continues while avoiding eye contact that might show the shame burning in his weathered face. The cold logic of his assessment rings true despite the bitter taste of betrayal that accompanies his accurate military analysis of your situation. You count torches moving through the darkness and realize that fewer than 10 warriors remain to defend the hall against Eric's army of madmen. Each desertion reduces your chances of survival, while proving that gold cannot purchase loyalty from men who calculate that service to you offers only certain death without glory. The remaining defenders gather in the great hall where firelight reveals faces marked by resignation rather than determination. These are men who chose to stay because they have nowhere else to go, rather than because they believe victory is possible against supernatural enemies who feel no pain and show no mercy. Young Bjorn Cupbearer confesses that he poisoned your wine stores before the berserkers arrived, his tears mixing with snot as he admits taking silver from your brother's agents. Even among those who remained, treachery continues to undermine your ability to organize effective resistance against the coming assault. The desertion reaches its peak near dawn, when your most trusted lieutenant, Olaf Silvertongue, slips away with the last of your horses and 2 men who were supposed to guard the eastern gate. Their departure leaves critical defensive positions unmanned, while reducing your mobile reserve to nothing. By sunrise, you stand on the ramparts with exactly 7 men to face 30 berserkers who have spent the night working themselves into killing frenzy with mushrooms and mead. The contrast between your enemy's supernatural courage and your followers' natural fear has created odds that no amount of tactical skill can overcome. The sight of your depleted forces brings cruel laughter from the berserker camp, where your brother prepares for an assault that will sweep away your pathetic resistance like a storm destroying a bird's nest. Eric Snake-Eye points at your thin defensive line, while his men howl appreciation for the slaughter to come. Your remaining warriors look to you for words of encouragement or tactical wisdom that might transform hopeless odds into glorious victory. But honest assessment reveals no strategies that could defeat supernatural enemies with natural men, leaving only the choice between honorable death and shameful flight to join the deserters in the forest. The thrall's hatred. Your surviving thralls move through the courtyard hauling water buckets with the same careful, efficient motions you remember from your own days in chains, but their eyes hold a different quality now as they watch their chieftain's power crumble. Where once there was resigned acceptance, you now see the calculating hatred of those who smell weakness in their oppressors. The Irish thrall Cormac speaks in whispered Gaelic to his fellow slaves while they work, his words too quiet to understand, but his tone carrying the unmistakable rhythm of conspiracy planning. You recognize the careful cadence of rebellion from your own memories of plotting freedom, and realize that these men see opportunity in your approaching defeat. Their wooden buckets move with deliberate slowness as they extend each trip to the well, maximizing time for secret conversations while appearing to work diligently. The thralls have learned to communicate through glances and gestures that bypass their Norse overseers, creating networks of resistance that you never suspected existed under your rule. Young Bridget, the captured Saxon girl who works in your kitchens, pauses to stare directly at you with eyes that burn with the same fury you once felt toward your own masters. Her brief moment of open defiance tells you that fear of punishment no longer outweighs desire for revenge against those who destroyed her freedom. The thralls' whispered conversations cease whenever free men approach, but resume immediately once they pass, suggesting coordination that extends throughout your household. These slaves have been planning and preparing while you focused on external enemies, turning your own foundation into another source of danger that threatens from within. Ragnar the Saxon draws water from the well with movements that seem normal, until you notice how his eyes catalogue the positions of weapons and the number of guards remaining after the night's desertions. He studies your defenses with the attention of someone planning an assault, measuring distances and timing patrol routes. The thralls exchange meaningful glances when they think no one watches, their silent communication revealing bonds forged in shared suffering that transcend the tribal differences between Irish, Saxon, and Frankish captives. Slavery has united them against their common oppressors more effectively than freedom ever united your warriors. Their work continues with mechanical precision, while their minds clearly focus on other matters, the careful balance between appearing obedient while preparing for revolt. You see in their faces the same expression you once wore while serving previous masters, that mask of compliance hiding murderous intent beneath. The bucket carrying becomes a ritual of reconnaissance as thralls map the hall's current weaknesses and count the reduced number of defenders. Each water trip provides intelligence about guard position, weapon locations, and escape routes that could serve rebellion as easily as flight. You realize with growing horror that your own memories of thrall life are now being used against you by slaves who learned the same lessons of patience, observation, and careful planning that once carried you from bondage to power. The oppressed have become students of oppression, turning your methods against their source. The irony strikes like a physical blow, as you understand that the hatred burning in their eyes once burned in your own heart when you looked at chieftains who seemed invulnerable. Now you stand in the position of those you once plotted to destroy, facing enemies who learned rebellion from your own example. Their whispered conversations continue with increasing boldness as news of your military disasters spreads through the household, each defeat encouraging the slaves to believe that their moment of liberation approaches with the fall of their master's power. Midnight flames. The first fire starts in the grain stores just after midnight, orange flames licking hungrily at the wooden walls, while you realize that your thralls have chosen this moment of maximum weakness to begin their revolt. The careful planning you observed in their whispered conversations now transforms into coordinated action designed to destroy everything you have left. Cormac, the Irish thrall, leads a group of slaves armed with kitchen knives and farming tools, their crude weapons gleaming in the firelight as they move with the desperate courage of men who know that failure means torture and death. Their faces show the same grim determination you once wore when planning your own escape from bondage. The Saxon girl Brigid appears in your doorway with a carving knife clutched in her trembling hands, her young face twisted by years of accumulated hatred finally given outlet. Now you learn what it means to be powerless, she hisses in accented Norse before lunging at your throat with surprising speed and deadly intent. You barely dodge her attack while grabbing for your sword, the irony not lost that your first enemy in this new battle is a teenage girl whose life you have controlled absolutely for 3 years. Her hatred burns so fiercely that death seems preferable to continued slavery under your rule. More fires bloom throughout the compound as coordinated thrall groups strike simultaneously at strategic targets designed to cripple your ability to organize defense or escape. The stables burn first, eliminating your horses and mobility, while the armory flames consume spare weapons that might have equipped loyal men. Ragnar the Saxon leads the most dangerous group of rebels, men who have learned military tactics by observing your warriors and now turn that knowledge against their former masters. They move with coordinated precision through the burning compound, their planning evident in how systematically they attack key defensive positions. Your remaining 7 warriors find themselves fighting on multiple fronts, as thrall attacks divide their attention between external berserker threats and internal slave rebellion. The rebels strike from shadows with intimate knowledge of the hall's layout, using passages and hiding places that years of servitude taught them to exploit. The thralls fight with the ferocity of cornered animals who understand that victory means freedom while defeat guarantees horrible death. Their desperation gives them courage that your professional warriors lack, turning kitchen slaves into deadly enemies who show no mercy to their former oppressors. Young Bjorn Cupbearer falls screaming as Irish thralls overwhelm him with farming tools, his death marking the first casualty in a battle that pits your household against itself. The slaves have chosen civil war over continued bondage, preferring death in rebellion to life in chains. Fire spreads through the compound with unnatural speed that suggests the thralls used oil and pitch to ensure maximum destruction. They learn from observing enemy attacks on your grain stores, applying those lessons to create an inferno that threatens to consume everything you have built. The smoke grows so thick that distinguishing friend from enemy becomes nearly impossible in the chaos of burning buildings and desperate combat. Your hall transforms into a nightmare landscape where former slaves hunt their masters through flames while berserkers prepare to assault from outside. You realize with growing despair that the thrall uprising has eliminated any hope of organized defense against your brother's berserker army, leaving you trapped between internal rebellion and external assault with no possibility of victory against either threat. Blood of Brotherhood. The execution of your childhood friend Finn Silvertongue takes place at dawn in the smouldering courtyard, where thrall rebellion and fire have reduced your compound to blackened timber and ash-covered stones. His bound hands tremble not from fear, but from rage at being discovered in secret negotiations with the enemy chieftains who orchestrated your downfall. Finn's betrayal cuts deeper than any sword wound, because your shared memories stretch back to youth when you learned weaponcraft together and swore oaths of eternal loyalty beside your father's hearth. The parchment found in his belongings details promises of land grants and silver in exchange for detailed intelligence about your defenses, troop movements, and personal weaknesses. His confession comes in broken words that reveal how thoroughly your enemies corrupted someone you trusted above all others. "They offered me what you never could," he whispers while avoiding your eyes that burn with the fury of absolute betrayal. "Security for my children when your reign ends in disaster and ruin." The practical logic of his treachery makes the betrayal more painful because you understand why fear for his family overcame loyalty to your friendship. Your enemies understood that every man has a price, including those bound by blood oaths and childhood memories that once seemed stronger than death itself. You raise the execution sword with hands that shake from grief rather than uncertainty, knowing that mercy would mark you as weak, while harsh justice destroys the last connection to your innocent past. The blade gleams in morning light as you prepare to sever not just his neck, but every remaining tie to the boy you once were. Finn's final words strike like arrows aimed at your heart. "I loved you like a brother, but brothers cannot save each other when the world burns around them," he says, while tears mix with the soot on his weathered cheeks. His acceptance of death carries more dignity than your position as his executioner. The sword falls with mechanical precision that divorces your mind from the horror of killing someone who once shared your childhood dreams of glory and brotherhood. His blood spatters across stones already stained by thrall rebellion, adding another layer to the carnage that marks your transformation from friend to executioner. Your remaining warriors watch the execution with faces that reveal their understanding that loyalty offers no protection from a chieftain who kills childhood friends for political necessity. The lesson teaches them that survival requires absolute obedience, while demonstrating how completely leadership has stripped away your humanity. The burial takes place without ceremony in a shallow grave beside the burned grain stores, his corpse joining the thralls and warriors who died in the night's violence. No marker distinguishes his resting place from those of slaves and enemies, death equalizing all distinctions that once seemed important in life. You walk away from Finn's grave, knowing that his blood on your hands has completed your transformation from the idealistic youth who once believed friendship could survive political necessity. Leadership has revealed that power requires destroying everyone you love, leaving you isolated on a throne built from the corpses of those who trusted you. The morning wind carries smoke from the compound fires, while you contemplate how executing your dearest friend serves your enemy's purpose more effectively than any military victory. They forced you to become the kind of ruler who kills brothers, ensuring that even survival feels like defeat. The practical knowledge that Finn's death was necessary cannot ease the spiritual wound of murdering someone who shared your childhood innocence before the corruption of power transformed both friendship and honor into luxuries that leaders cannot afford to maintain. The Witchwife's Curse. The nightmares begin on the third night after Finn's execution, visions so vivid and terrible that you cannot distinguish between sleep and waking, as enemy witchwives weave sorcery designed to drive you into madness that will make you vulnerable to final destruction by conventional enemies who prefer psychological warfare to direct assault. Helga Nightwalker, wife to your enemy, Sigurd Blackbeard, practices the dark arts learned from her Danish grandmother, who served the old gods before Christianity weakened, but did not eliminate the ancient powers that flow through bloodlines dedicated to bringing down those who threaten their men's political ambitions. The dreams show your death in dozens of different forms, drowning in icy waters while your brother's laughter echoes across the waves, burning alive in your hall while thralls dance around the flames, or bleeding slowly from poison that turns your blood to liquid fire while enemies feast on your wealth. Each vision feels completely real until you wake screaming in your bed, only to discover that the waking world offers little relief from horrors that your mind cannot dismiss as mere fantasy. The witchwives understand that breaking your will requires making you question the nature of reality itself until paranoia replaces rational thought. Sleep becomes your enemy as exhaustion. Wars against terror of returning to dreams where every death feels authentic enough to leave physical pain in your chest and throat. The sorcery operates through dream logic that makes impossible events seem inevitable, while leaving you uncertain whether any experience can be trusted. Ingrid Bloodhair, second wife to Magnus Redhair, supplements the dream attacks with subtle poisoning that enhances the nightmares while creating symptoms that mirror the dream deaths. Your throat burns as if from strangling, your lungs ache as if from drowning, and your skin blisters as if from flames. The witchwives coordinate their assault through meetings held at crossroads under new moons, their combining of individual powers creating supernatural attacks that no amount of conventional guards or weapons can deflect. They wage war through channels that bypass physical defenses to strike directly at your sanity. Your few remaining followers begin avoiding you as the sleeplessness and constant terror transform your appearance into something gaunt and haunted that suggests possession by evil spirits. The sorcery works by making your own people fear you while enemies prepare for the final assault against a leader whose mind has been shattered. The symptoms worsen as days pass without genuine rest, your ability to make rational decisions compromised by exhaustion and fear, while the witchwives intensify their attacks in preparation for the conventional assault that will follow your psychological collapse. They understand that broken minds cannot command effective resistance. Desperate remedies fail, as Christian prayers offer no protection against older powers that predate the new religion by centuries. The cross around your neck provides no shield against sorcery that operates through ancestral knowledge passed down through generations of women who serve the ancient gods. You begin seeing enemies in shadows and hearing conspiracies in every whispered conversation, the paranoia fed by genuine threats but amplified by supernatural interference, until distinguishing real dangers from imaginary ones becomes impossible. The witchwives have achieved their goal of making you your own worst enemy. The realization that sorcery has compromised your judgment comes too late to prevent the mistakes that flow from supernatural manipulation, leaving you vulnerable to conventional attacks by enemies who understand that defeating your mind eliminates the need to overcome your military defenses through direct assault. Death in birth. Your wife Astrid's labor begins at the worst possible moment, her screams of pain mixing with the sounds of battle preparation as your brother's berserker army masses for the final assault that will determine whether you live or die as chieftain. The timing seems cursed, as if the gods conspire to multiply your suffering by forcing you to watch new life struggle for breath while death surrounds your crumbling hall. The midwife Gudrun Ironhands works with blood-stained fingers in the chamber above your great hall, her grim expression telling you that both mother and child face dangers that her long experience cannot easily overcome. Each contraction brings Astrid closer to death, while the baby fights for life in a world that offers little hope for survival, even under better circumstances. Astrid's face grows pale as winter snow, while blood soaks through the birthing straw beneath her struggling body. Her whispered prayers to the Virgin Mary compete with older invocations to Frigg and the goddesses who govern childbirth, desperation making her call upon any divine power that might preserve her life and that of your unborn heir. The sounds of approaching berserkers penetrate the birthing chamber as your brother's army works itself into final frenzy for the assault that could come at any moment. Each war cry from outside reminds you that your child may be born only to die minutes later in the massacre that seems inevitable given your pathetic defenses. Your son emerges into the world with the cord wrapped around his tiny neck, the blue color of his skin telling Gudrun that death has already claimed your heir before his first breath. The midwife works desperately to clear his airway, but his stillness confirms that the succession you fought to secure has died with the infant who will never grow to manhood. Astrid bleeds out slowly on the birthing bed while you hold your dead son's cooling body, the double tragedy destroying your political position, while grief overwhelms the practical necessity of organizing defense against enemies who now assault a leaderless household. Your bloodline ends with the corpse cradled in your trembling hands. The irony strikes with crushing force as you realize that your climb to chieftain status has resulted in the death of everything you sought to protect and preserve. The power you fought to achieve has poisoned your reign with betrayal, rebellion, and supernatural assault that culminates in watching your family die while enemies prepare for final victory. Gudrun closes Astrid's eyes with coins meant for the ferryman, while you struggle to accept that the woman who shared your bed and bore your children has joined the growing list of casualties caused by your political ambitions. Her death eliminates your strongest ally, while leaving you completely isolated in leadership that has become synonymous with disaster. Your remaining warriors avoid the death chamber, where you mourn beside two corpses that represent the complete failure of everything you attempted to build and preserve. The sight of their chieftain cradling a dead infant while his wife grows cold nearby confirms their worst fears about the curse that seems to follow your reign. The practical implications of losing your heir become clear as you realize that your death in the coming battle will end your bloodline completely, leaving no legitimate successor to continue your political agenda or avenge your defeat. Your enemies have eliminated your future along with your present through the simple expedient of ensuring that neither wife nor child survives your reign. You prepare to face your brother's berserkers while carrying the additional burden of grief that makes death in battle seem preferable to survival without family or hope for continuation. The double funeral must wait until after the fighting ends, assuming any loyal men remain alive to dig graves for those whose deaths mark the complete collapse of your chieftain dreams. The realization that power has cost you everything worth living for transforms the approaching battle from a struggle for survival into a welcome opportunity for honorable death that will reunite you with the family that political necessity destroyed through your pursuit of authority that proved worthless when measured against personal loss. The farmer's desperate plea. The delegation of starving farmers arrives at your gates just after dawn, their gaunt faces and hollow eyes telling the story of failed harvests and empty storage pits that threaten death for every child in their care. You recognize your former self in their desperate expressions, remembering the terror of watching winter approach without adequate food supplies to sustain life through the hungry months. Olaf Stonebreaker speaks for the group, his weathered hands trembling as he describes raiders who have systematically destroyed crops and livestock throughout the region. "Lord, we come seeking protection from enemies who burn our fields and slaughter our animals," he says, while avoiding eye contact that might reveal the shame of begging for help from someone whose own power crumbles with each passing day. Their children cling to skeletal mothers who have already sacrificed their own meals to keep the young alive for another few weeks. The sight strikes you with memories of your own farming days, when starvation loomed like a constant shadow, threatening to reclaim those who dared attempt independence from the security of servitude. Ingrid Graincounter, the only woman among the delegation, holds her dying infant while explaining how raiders poisoned their wells and salted their fields to ensure that nothing would grow in the coming season. Her tears mix with the exhaustion that comes from watching helplessly as everything needed for survival disappears into smoke and ash. The farmers offer their remaining grain stores as payment for protection, but their pathetic sacks contain barely enough food to sustain your household for 3 days. Their desperation has driven them to bargain with resources that cannot possibly compensate for the military effort required to defend scattered farmsteads against organized enemies. You calculate the impossible mathematics of their request, while understanding that accepting responsibility for their defense commits your few remaining warriors to battles that cannot be won with current resources. Each farmstead attacked requires men you cannot spare, while failure to protect them destroys your reputation as a leader capable of defending those who trust him. The irony burns like acid as you realize that your position as chieftain makes you responsible for protecting people you cannot actually save. Their faith in your authority exceeds your practical ability to project power beyond your own crumbling stronghold, creating obligations that guarantee failure while demanding resources you do not possess. Magnus Barleybeard points to smoke rising from distant farmsteads while explaining how raiders work systematically through the region, destroying everything that supports independent farming. "They mean to starve us into submission or death," he says with the weary acceptance of someone who understands that survival may no longer be possible for small farmers in a world ruled by violence. Your own memories of farming desperation make their plight personally painful because you remember the crushing weight of depending on others for protection while having nothing valuable to offer in return. The cycle of vulnerability continues as those who escape one form of helplessness discover that higher positions simply reveal new and more complex forms of powerlessness. The children's hunger-swollen bellies remind you of your own son's corpse upstairs, the dead infant representing not just personal loss, but the broader failure of leadership that cannot protect the next generation from the violence that consumes everything worth preserving. Their living children face the same fate that claimed your heir through different means. You struggle to find words that acknowledge their desperate need while avoiding promises that cannot be kept with available resources. The farmers wait with the patience of those who understand that rejection means death, but still hope that somehow protection might be possible through appeals to shared humanity. The cruel mathematics of leadership force you to weigh their lives against strategic necessities that make protecting scattered farmsteads impossible when you lack sufficient men to defend even your own hall from the enemies who mass for final assault against your crumbling authority. The impossible choice. The military council convenes in your smoke-damaged Great Hall, where the few remaining loyal men gather around a scarred wooden table to discuss the farmers' request for protection against raiders who systematically destroy the agricultural base that feeds everyone in the region. The mathematics of the situation become brutally clear as you count heads and calculate distances between threatened settlements. Gunner Stonefist, your most experienced war leader, spreads a crude map drawn on sheepskin while pointing out the locations of farmsteads under attack. We have 7 fighting men to protect 23 scattered holdings across 15 miles of difficult terrain, he says, with the blunt honesty of someone who understands that military impossibility cannot be overcome through good intentions or desperate courage. The strategic situation reveals itself as a trap designed by enemies who understand that forcing you to choose between protecting farmers or defending your hall ensures catastrophic failure regardless of your decision. Dispersing your men to guard farmsteads leaves your stronghold vulnerable to the berserker assault that could come at any moment, while abandoning the farmers destroys your reputation as a leader worth following. Young Eric Shieldbearer argues for attempting to protect the most defensible farmsteads while abandoning those in exposed positions, but his proposal requires resources and coordination that your depleted forces cannot provide. The compromise satisfies no one, while guaranteeing that both farmers and your own people will suffer from inadequate protection against determined enemies. The farmers wait outside in the courtyard while your council debates their fate, their patient endurance reflecting the resignation of people who understand that their survival depends entirely on decisions made by others. Their children play quietly in the ash-covered yard, unaware that the discussion inside will determine whether they live through the coming winter. Thorstein Battlewise presents the harsh arithmetic that governs military reality in terms that strip away all illusion about your ability to save everyone who seeks protection. Spreading 7 men across 23 positions means that each attack will overwhelm our defenders before help can arrive, he explains, while avoiding eye contact that might reveal his own desperation about the situation. The choice crystallizes into a decision between certain defeat in 2 different forms: military disaster through dispersed defense, or political destruction through abandoning those who trusted your protection. Either path leads to the collapse of your authority, but the manner of failure will determine whether death comes quickly through berserker assault or slowly through loss of legitimacy among surviving followers. Your memories of farming vulnerability make the farmer's plight personally devastating because you remember the crushing realization that powerful men view desperate appeals for help as burdensome obligations rather than moral imperatives. The transformation from suppliant to authority has revealed how impossible demands appear from the perspective of those who must make life and death decisions with inadequate resources. The practical necessities of leadership force you to weigh abstract concepts like honor and responsibility against the concrete reality that your brother's berserkers will assault your hall within days. Defending farmers becomes a luxury that your position cannot afford when failure to protect your own stronghold eliminates any possibility of future aid to anyone. The silence stretches as your war leaders wait for a decision that will define the final phase of your reign, understanding that this choice between competing impossibilities will determine whether your fall comes through military defeat or political abandonment by those who expected protection you cannot provide. You realize with growing despair that true leadership in desperate circumstances means choosing which people will die rather than finding ways to save everyone. The ultimate corruption of authority that transforms guardians into executioners who must select victims from among those who trusted them most completely. The farmer's patient waiting outside represents the faith that common people place in leaders who promise protection while lacking the power to deliver security. creating moral obligations that exceed practical capabilities and ensure that authority becomes synonymous with failure when measured against the needs of those who depend on it. The merchant's flight. The last wealthy traders in your territory depart before dawn, their heavily laden wagons disappearing into morning mist, while taking with them the commercial relationships that funded your warband and sustained the economy that made your chieftain status more than mere title. You watch from your tower as Magnus Silvertongue leads a caravan carrying enough wealth to equip an army, his departure eliminating your final source of the silver needed to pay warriors or purchase essential supplies. Bjorn Gold Counter, who once paid premium prices for your protection of his trade routes, now flees towards safer territories where chieftains can guarantee safe passage without the constant threat of berserker attacks and thrall rebellions that make your realm a commercial disaster zone. His loaded carts represent prosperity, abandoning your lands for regions where political stability makes trade profitable rather than suicidal. The merchant caravan includes wives and children whose comfortable lives depended on the security you once provided, but can no longer guarantee against enemies who view wealthy traders as targets for both plunder and political pressure. Their departure removes not just commercial activity, but also the skilled craftsmen, scribes, and artisans whose work supported the complex economy that distinguished civilization from mere survival. Ingrid Pearlworker, whose jewelry adorned the women of your household during better times, departs with her entire workshop packed into wagons that carry away the luxury goods that marked your court as prosperous and sophisticated. Her absence eliminates access to the fine craftsmanship that demonstrated your status to visiting dignitaries and potential allies. The trader's reasons for leaving become clear through overheard conversations that reveal how your political disasters have made commerce impossible in territories where wars, rebellions, and supernatural curses create risks that no amount of profit can justify. Their departure serves as public announcement that your protection has become worthless while association with you threatens financial ruin. Eric Amber, Eyes, whose ships once brought exotic goods from distant ports, loads his vessels with everything portable while explaining to his crew that continuing trade relationships with your realm would mark them as enemies of the chieftains who now control regional commerce. His fleet disappears over the horizon like hope itself, abandoning your cause. The economic collapse accelerates as word spreads that major merchants consider your territory too dangerous for continued business, their departure creating a cascade effect that eliminates smaller traders who depended on the larger operations for market access and financial backing. The commercial network that took years to build unravels in days as confidence evaporates. Your treasury empties rapidly as the last silver flows out to pay for essential supplies, while no new wealth enters through trade relationships that provided the foundation of your political power. The merchants understood that chieftains without economic resources cannot maintain the military strength necessary to protect anything, including themselves. The departure of merchant families eliminates the civilian prosperity that justified your authority by demonstrating how effective leadership creates conditions for peaceful commerce and cultural development. Their absence reduces your realm to a military camp surrounded by enemies, with no productive economy to support long-term resistance against superior forces. Thorstein Silk, trader's final message, arrives by messenger, explaining that continuing business with you would invite retaliation from the chieftains who now dominate regional politics through their alliance against your authority. His formal withdrawal of commercial relationships serves as official notification that your political isolation has become economically devastating. The empty market squares where merchants once gathered to trade goods from across the known world now stand silent and abandoned, their desolation serving as visible proof that your reign has destroyed the prosperity that made your territory valuable to allies and attractive to settlers seeking better lives. The realization strikes that wealthy merchants possess the mobility to abandon failing leaders, while common people remain trapped by circumstances that make flight impossible, creating a situation where those most capable of providing economic support escape first, while those most in need of protection have no choice but to remain and face whatever disasters follow the collapse of authority. The final caravan. The last merchant caravan attempting to leave your territory meets its doom 3 miles beyond your eastern border, where enemy raiders massacre 30 traders and their guards in a coordinated attack designed to eliminate your final source of commercial silver, while sending a message that association with you brings death to anyone foolish enough to maintain business relationships. The smoke rising from burning wagons carries the stench of death and destruction across the morning landscape, visible from your tower as a black column that marks the complete severing of economic ties between your realm and the outside world. Each burning cart represents years of careful relationship, building reduced to ash and corpses by enemies who understand that commercial isolation precedes political collapse. Magnus Iron Merchant lies among the dead with his throat cut and his silver scattered across blood-soaked ground, his death eliminating the last trader willing to risk association with your failing authority. His merchant seal, trampled into mud beside his corpse, symbolizes the end of legitimate commerce in territories where your protection has become synonymous with certain death. The raiders work with systematic efficiency that suggests professional coordination rather than opportunistic banditry. Their targeting of specific merchants and goods, revealing detailed intelligence about trade relationships and cargo manifests. Your enemies planned this massacre to ensure maximum economic impact, while demonstrating their ability to project lethal force beyond your borders. Young Eric Coin Counter, barely 16 years old, dies clutching the accounting ledgers that recorded months of careful negotiations and trade agreements, now rendered worthless by his death. His blood soaks through the parchment that documented commercial relationships, your enemies destroyed through violence rather than competition. The attack eliminates not just goods and silver, but also the knowledge networks that made complex trade possible across vast distances. The dead merchants carried information about market conditions, currency exchange rates, and political developments in distant ports, intelligence that died with them and cannot be easily replaced. Enemy jarls arrived to survey the massacre scene with satisfaction that reveals how thoroughly they planned this economic warfare designed to strangle your authority through commercial isolation. Their casual inspection of the corpses demonstrates professional attention to ensuring that no survivors escaped to carry news of trade routes or market opportunities. The raiders strip valuable goods while leaving obvious evidence of your failure to protect those who trusted your guarantees of safe passage. Merchant tokens and trading licenses bearing your seal lie scattered among the dead, their presence serving as testimony to the worthlessness of your political authority when measured against enemy determination. The strategic timing of the massacre coincides with harvest season, when merchants normally purchase grain and livestock for winter trade, eliminating your opportunity to convert agricultural surplus into the silver needed to pay warriors or purchase weapons. The economic calendar becomes another weapon in enemy hands. Word of the slaughter spreads rapidly through merchant networks, ensuring that no future traders will risk association with territories where commerce brings death rather than profit. The massacre serves as permanent warning that your realm has become commercially toxic, eliminating any possibility of economic recovery through renewed trade relationships. The bodies remain unburied as ravens and wolves feast on corpses that serve as monuments to your failure as protector and guarantor of safe passage. The decomposing merchants marked the spot where your political authority died, along with those who trusted your promises of security. Your remaining followers witness the smoke and understand its meaning without explanation, their faces showing the resignation of people who realize that economic collapse makes military defeat inevitable. The dead caravan represents the death of hope for any solution except honorable defeat in battle. The hall's end. The coordinated attack on your hall begins at midnight when enemy forces strike simultaneously from 3 directions, their torches creating a ring of fire that illuminates the final assault against everything you built during your brief and disastrous reign as chieftain. The flames reflect off weapons and armor worn by warriors from multiple clans who have united for the single purpose of destroying you and everyone loyal to your cause. Sigurd Blackbeard leads the main assault through your eastern gate, his berserkers howling war cries that mix with the crackling of timber as enemy raiders set fire to everything combustible. Magnus Redhair commands the western flank, while your brother Eric Snakeeye approaches from the north, their coordination demonstrating months of careful planning for this moment of total destruction. The hall that housed your ancestors for 4 generations burns with flames that consume centuries of accumulated treasures, weapons, and memories that connected you to the heroic past your reign has dishonored through failure and defeat. Tapestries depicting great victories disappear into smoke, while ancient weapons melt in heat that destroys history along with hope. Your few remaining warriors fight desperately through corridors filled with smoke and falling timber, their courage meaningless against overwhelming numbers of enemies who show no mercy to those who served a chieftain marked for destruction. The sound of battle mixes with creaking wood and roaring flames as your stronghold becomes a funeral pyre. Gunnar's stone fist dies defending the main door while enemy axes cut him down, his blood mixing with ash as he falls across the threshold he swore to protect. His death marks the first breach in defenses that cannot hold against coordinated assault by forces that outnumber your defenders 10 to 1. The flames spread through the hall with unnatural speed that suggests enemy use of oil and pitch to ensure complete destruction rather than simple military victory. They want nothing left standing that might serve as monument to your reign or rallying point for future resistance, their thoroughness revealing how completely they intend to erase your legacy. Enemy warriors pour through burning doorways like demons emerging from hell itself, their faces painted with soot and blood as they hunt through smoke-filled chambers for anyone loyal to your cause. The systematic search reveals their intention to eliminate witnesses along with leaders, ensuring that no one survives to carry tales of your final battle. You fight through collapsing corridors toward the chamber where your wife and son lie dead, hoping to die beside their corpses rather than flee like a coward, while your hall burns around the bodies of those who trusted your leadership. The flames drive you back repeatedly, making even this final gesture of loyalty impossible to achieve. The roof caves in with a thunderous crash that sends sparks shooting skyward like fallen stars returning to the heavens they abandoned. The sound marks the final collapse of physical structures that represented your authority while announcing to distant enemies that your reign has ended in fire and defeat. Ancient treasures disappear into flames that consume gold arm rings passed down through generations, silver cups used at victory feasts, and weapons carried by heroes whose names will be forgotten along with everything else your failure has destroyed. The fire erases history while creating new legends about the folly of those who rise too high, too fast. Your surviving men retreat toward the back passages where escape might be possible, their faces showing the desperation of those who understand that survival requires abandoning everything worth defending. The choice between death with honor and flight with shame tears at their warrior pride, while flames eliminate time for careful consideration. The hall collapses completely as dawn breaks over smoldering ruins where nothing remains of centuries of achievement except ash and memories that will fade like smoke dispersing in morning wind. Your reign ends not with glorious battle death, but with ignominious flight from burning wreckage that serves as your monument. The hall's end. The coordinated attack on your hall begins at midnight when enemy forces strike simultaneously from 3 directions, their torches creating a ring of fire that illuminates the final assault against everything you built during your brief and disastrous reign as chieftain. The flames reflect off weapons and armor worn by warriors from multiple clans who have united for the single purpose of destroying you and everyone loyal to your cause. Sigurd Blackbeard leads the main assault through your eastern gate, his berserkers howling war cries that mix with the crackling of timber as enemy raiders set fire to everything combustible. Magnus Redhair commands the western flank, while your brother Eric Snakeeye approaches from the north, their coordination demonstrating months of careful planning for this moment of total destruction. The hall that housed your ancestors for 4 generations burns with flames that consume centuries of accumulated treasures, weapons, and memories that connected you to the heroic past your reign has dishonored through failure and defeat. Tapestries depicting great victories disappear into smoke, while ancient weapons melt in heat that destroys history along with hope. Your few remaining warriors fight desperately through corridors filled with smoke and falling timber, their courage meaningless against overwhelming numbers of enemies who show no mercy to those who served a chieftain marked for destruction. The sound of battle mixes with creaking wood and roaring flames as your stronghold becomes a funeral pyre. Gunnar's stone fist dies defending the main door while enemy axes cut him down, his blood mixing with ash as he falls across the threshold he swore to protect. His death marks the first breach in defenses that cannot hold against coordinated assault by forces that outnumber your defenders 10 to 1. The flames spread through the hall with unnatural speed that suggests enemy use of oil and pitch to ensure complete destruction rather than simple military victory. They want nothing left standing that might serve as monument to your reign or rallying point for future resistance, their thoroughness revealing how completely they intend to erase your legacy. Enemy warriors pour through burning doorways like demons emerging from hell itself, their faces painted with soot and blood as they hunt through smoke-filled chambers for anyone loyal to your cause. The systematic search reveals their intention to eliminate witnesses along with leaders, ensuring that no one survives to carry tales of your final battle. You fight through collapsing corridors toward the chamber where your wife and son lie dead, hoping to die beside their corpses rather than flee like a coward, while your hall burns around the bodies of those who trusted your leadership. The flames drive you back repeatedly, making even this final gesture of loyalty impossible to achieve. The roof caves in with a thunderous crash that sends sparks shooting skyward like fallen stars returning to the heavens they abandoned. The sound marks the final collapse of physical structures that represented your authority while announcing to distant enemies that your reign has ended in fire and defeat. Ancient treasures disappear into flames that consume gold arm rings passed down through generations, silver cups used at victory feasts, and weapons carried by heroes whose names will be forgotten along with everything else your failure has destroyed. The fire erases history while creating new legends about the folly of those who rise too high, too fast. Your surviving men retreat toward the back passages where escape might be possible, their faces showing the desperation of those who understand that survival requires abandoning everything worth defending. The choice between death with honor and flight with shame tears at their warrior pride, while flames eliminate time for careful consideration. The hall collapses completely as dawn breaks over smoldering ruins where nothing remains of centuries of achievement except ash and memories that will fade like smoke dispersing in morning wind. Your reign ends not with glorious battle death, but with ignominious flight from burning wreckage that serves as your monument. Winter Hunt. The frozen forest becomes your new kingdom as you flee through snow-laden trees with the handful of warriors who chose exile over surrender, your breath forming ice crystals in air so cold that exposed skin freezes within minutes. Behind you, enemy jarls organize the most systematic manhunt in Iceland's history, offering a king's ransom for your severed head while promising death to anyone who aids your escape. Thorstein Battlewise, your last loyal lieutenant, leads the desperate retreat through terrain that offers concealment at the cost of certain death from exposure if shelter cannot be found before nightfall. His knowledge of hunting trails and winter survival keeps you alive hour by hour, while enemies close the net around your dwindling band of fugitives. The snow preserves tracks that make pursuit inevitable, each footprint marking your passage for enemies who follow with the patience of hunters who understand that winter will accomplish what weapons could not. Your flight becomes a race against time, cold, and starvation, while enemy forces maintain pressure from multiple directions. Young Olaf Wolfslayer collapses from exhaustion and cold after 2 days of continuous movement, his body too weakened by recent wounds to endure the brutal pace required for survival. You face the choice between abandoning a loyal man or risking capture of the entire group, leadership reduced to deciding who lives and who dies among those who trusted your judgment. The decision to leave Olaf behind haunts you as his final words echo through the forest silence. "Tell them I died well," he whispers through blue lips, while you disappear into trees that will witness his solitary death. His sacrifice buys time measured in hours, while enemies pause to confirm that one of their targets has been eliminated. Enemy hunting parties work with professional coordination that suggests extensive experience in tracking fugitives through winter conditions, their systematic approach eliminating hiding places while driving you toward terrain where capture becomes inevitable. The hunters understand that desperation makes prey predictable, using your fear against your survival instincts. The cold becomes an enemy more dangerous than human pursuers, as frostbite claims fingers and toes, while hypothermia clouds judgment needed for tactical decisions. Your expensive chieftain's clothes provide no protection against winter that kills through exposure rather than violence, teaching you that authority offers no defense against natural forces. Food becomes increasingly scarce as the hunt continues, forcing you to eat bark and frozen berries while your body burns muscle for fuel that keeps you moving toward uncertain refuge. Starvation weakens you physically, while desperation drives increasingly poor decisions about route selection and rest periods. Magnus' stone arm dies in his sleep during the third night, his body unable to generate enough heat to survive temperatures that turn breath into ice and make metal weapons too cold to touch without losing skin. His death reduces your group to 3 survivors, while providing bitter proof that winter shows no mercy to those who challenge its authority. The enemy net tightens as hunting parties coordinate their search pattern to eliminate escape routes while driving you toward terrain where capture or death become the only options. Their patient professionalism makes desperate gambits seem preferable to continued flight through conditions that guarantee eventual defeat through attrition. You realize with growing despair that the manhunt serves enemy political purposes beyond simple revenge, demonstrating their power while providing entertainment for those who bet on how long the fallen chieftain will survive before capture or death. Your suffering becomes spectacle, while your defeat serves as warning to others who might challenge established authority. The forest that once seemed to offer sanctuary reveals itself as another form of prison, where walls consist of cold, hunger, and exhaustion rather than stone and iron. Freedom becomes indistinguishable from a slower form of execution, as winter accomplishes what enemies could achieve through direct assault, but choose to prolong for maximum psychological impact. The taste of defeat. Starvation drives you to the ultimate degradation, as you and your surviving men consume the flesh of enemy warriors killed in the skirmish at Raven's Ford. The metallic taste of human meat mixing with bile that rises from your throat while crossing the final boundary that separates civilization from savagery. The transformation from noble leader to cannibalistic fugitive completes your descent into behaviors that would have horrified the idealistic young man who once believed honor mattered more than survival. Thorstein battle-wise vomits repeatedly while forcing himself to swallow strips of cooked flesh that represent the difference between continuing flight and dying of hunger in the wilderness. His warrior's stomach, hardened by years of battlefield carnage, rebels against consuming enemy bodies that once housed souls as noble as his own, before political necessity reduced them to emergency provisions. The fire that cooks your grisly meal sends smoke signals that enemy hunters will surely detect, but starvation makes such risks acceptable when the alternative involves death from weakness that would end your flight before reaching any possible sanctuary. Each bite of forbidden flesh buys another day of life while destroying another piece of the honor that once defined your character. Eric Stonehand tears meat from leg bones with teeth that once smiled at feast tables where civilized men shared bread and ale while discussing poetry and philosophy. The irony strikes you that leadership has reduced cultured warriors to beasts who gnaw human remains while hiding in caves like animals fleeing forest fires that consume everything in their path. The practical knowledge that cannibalism violates every law of gods and men cannot overcome the biological imperative that demands nutrition from any available source when death stalks those who refuse to adapt their morality to survival requirements. Honor becomes a luxury that starving fugitives cannot afford when measured against the immediate need for calories that enable continued resistance. Your men avoid eye contact while eating because acknowledging what you consume together would make the act impossible to continue, their faces showing the shame of those who understand that survival sometimes requires behaviors that destroy the soul while preserving the body. The silence during your meal speaks of innocence lost and dignity abandoned for the sake of biological necessity. The enemy warriors you consume died honorably in battle, their courage entitling them to proper burial with weapons and grave goods, rather than serving as food for the men who killed them. Their transformation from respected opponents to emergency rations represents the complete collapse of the honor code that once governed warfare between noble enemies. The taste lingers long after the meal ends, a reminder that desperation transforms human beings into creatures capable of any act required for survival, regardless of moral cost or spiritual consequence. Leadership taught you to make impossible choices, but this decision reduces you to something less than the thrall you once were when simple bondage seemed like the worst fate imaginable. Your stomach accepts the forbidden nourishment, while your mind struggles to process the reality that political ambition has led to consuming the bodies of men who might have been friends under different circumstances. The flesh provides strength for continued flight, while destroying whatever remained of the person who once believed leadership meant protecting others from such degradations. The snow continues falling as you prepare to resume flight through territory where enemies hunt you like the animal you have become, through choices that seemed necessary at the time, but now reveal themselves as steps on a path leading inevitably toward complete moral destruction. Cannibalism marks the point where survival ceases to justify the methods required to achieve it. You realize with growing horror that each compromise of principle makes the next transgression easier to accept, creating a downward spiral where desperate circumstances justify increasingly terrible acts until nothing remains of the person who originally sought power for noble purposes rather than mere survival at any cost. The enemy flesh sustains your body while poisoning your soul, providing energy for continued flight while eliminating any illusion that your cause retains moral legitimacy, worthy of the sacrifices demanded from those foolish enough to remain loyal to leadership that has devolved into systematic destruction of everything worth preserving. The Friend's Betrayal. Hakon, Iron Shield, emerges from the tree line leading a full company of enemy warriors, his familiar face now bearing the calculating expression of a hunter who has finally cornered his prey after months of careful pursuit. The warrior landowner who once shared your table and swore oaths of friendship now approaches with drawn sword. His transformation from ally to executioner, proving that political necessity dissolves personal bonds as easily as spring thaw melts winter ice. Your recognition of his voice calling for your surrender brings the crushing realization that someone you trusted with your life has spent weeks coordinating with your enemies to ensure your capture or death. His knowledge of your tactics, hiding places, and escape routes provided the intelligence that made this ambush possible, while demonstrating how thoroughly your former allies have abandoned you to save themselves. Yield, old friend, and I promise your death will be quick, Hakon calls across the clearing where you stand with your 2 surviving men, his offer of mercy carrying the hollow ring of political necessity rather than genuine compassion. The respectful tone cannot disguise the fact that your childhood companion has become another weapon in enemy hands, his betrayal more painful than any sword wound. Thorstein, battle-wise, spits blood from the wound in his side while drawing his sword for what he knows will be the final battle of his life. I would rather die with honor than live with the shame of serving that, he says while pointing at Hakon with contempt that encompasses all those who sacrifice friendship for political advantage or personal survival. The warrior who once defended your borders alongside you now wears the colors of Magnus' red hair, his new allegiance proclaimed by the banner carried behind him as he advances with professional caution that acknowledges your reputation despite the hopelessness of your situation. Political reality has transformed him from brother-in-arms to executioner carrying out sentence passed by enemies you both once fought together. Hakon's men spread out to prevent escape, while he approaches close enough for conversation that might spare unnecessary bloodshed if you accept the inevitable outcome with dignity befitting a fallen chieftain. His tactical dispositions reveal the same military competence that made him valuable as ally and dangerous as enemy, skills now serving those who benefit from your destruction. Your reign brought nothing but death and ruin, he continues, while his warriors move to optimal positions for assault that will overwhelm your pathetic resistance through superior numbers and coordination. The accusation stings because his assessment carries enough truth to wound more deeply than simple insult or enemy propaganda designed to justify betrayal. Your memory of Hakon, as the young warrior who saved your life at Skald's Ridge, conflicts with present reality, where that same man prepares to end your existence through betrayal, disguised as political necessity. The transformation proves that friendship means nothing when measured against the survival instincts that drive men to abandon failing causes before they become contaminated by association. The irony burns like poison as you realize that your former friend now serves the same enemies who destroyed your hall and murdered your family. His loyalty purchased through promises of land grants and protection from the fate that awaits all who supported your disastrous reign. His betrayal represents rational calculation rather than personal malice, making it more terrible than simple hatred. Eric Stonehand, readies his weapon, while understanding that 3 exhausted fugitives cannot defeat 20 fresh warriors led by someone who knows their capabilities and limitations intimately. The mathematics of the confrontation guarantee defeat, but warrior honor demands resistance regardless of outcome when surrender offers only the choice between quick death and slow torture. The battle begins without formal declaration, as your men charge towards certain death rather than accept capture that would provide entertainment for enemies who prefer extracting information through systematic torture. Their courage shines brightest in this final moment, when loyalty to failed leadership offers nothing except honorable death in hopeless combat. Hakon's blade meets yours with the familiar ring of steel that once sounded during practice sessions, when you taught each other techniques that both of you now use in deadly earnest. The irony of fighting your former mentor with skills he helped you develop adds another layer of tragedy to betrayal that transforms friendship into the cruelest form of execution. Chains of Truth. Ragnar Snake-Tongue, your last trusted ally and the man who held your war treasury during better times, delivers the final betrayal by revealing your location to enemy hunters in exchange for pardons and silver that ensure his family's survival. His deception traps you in the abandoned farmstead where you sought temporary shelter, proving that desperation drives even the most loyal men to sacrifice honor for their children's safety. The iron chains that bind your wrists bite into flesh, already torn by weeks of flight through frozen wilderness, their weight serving as constant reminder that Chieftain's authority has been replaced by the helplessness of captured prey awaiting execution. Your captors take particular pleasure in using the same chains that once held thralls in your household, the symbolism too perfect to be accidental. Magnus Redhair oversees your interrogation personally, his skilled hands working with heated iron and sharp knives, while extracting information about hidden silver hoards and weapons caches that might serve future rebellions. Each scream that tears from your throat reveals how completely the illusions of power have crumbled when authority becomes vulnerability in enemy hands. The torture chamber occupies the cellar of your own burned hall, its familiar stone walls now witnessing your agony instead of feast celebrations where you once dispensed justice and rewards to loyal followers. The irony strikes through waves of pain as you realize that enemies have transformed your seat of power into the site of your complete humiliation. Your tormentors work with professional efficiency that suggests extensive experience in extracting information from political prisoners. Their systematic approach designed to break your will while keeping you conscious enough to provide useful intelligence about assets and alliances that might threaten their consolidated power over your former territories. The heated iron brands your flesh with symbols that mark you as traitor and oath-breaker, the physical scars serving as permanent record of your fall from chieftain to criminal, whose only value lies in whatever secrets can be torn from your suffering body. Each mark burns away another piece of the dignity that once commanded respect from free men. Between torture sessions, they allow brief periods of consciousness that reveal the political celebrations occurring above your underground prison. The sounds of feasting and laughter filter through stone floors, while your enemies divide your lands and assets like vultures dismembering a corpse, their joy made complete by knowing you witness your legacy's destruction. Your body breaks before your spirit, as repeated sessions destroy your ability to maintain defiance against pain that overwhelms rational thought, and reduces existence to the immediate need for relief that only comes through cooperation with demands for information. The physical collapse precedes psychological surrender that makes betrayal seem like mercy. The final session extracts the location of your emergency silver cache buried beneath the ancient oak at Raven's Grove, the last resource that might have funded future attempts at reclaiming your position. Your broken voice provides directions while tears mix with blood on the stone floor, where your authority dissolves completely. Enemy agents depart immediately to recover the treasure, while you remain chained in darkness that offers no relief from pain or despair. Your usefulness exhausted, and your death now inevitable once they confirm that your information proves accurate. The waiting becomes another form of torture, as you anticipate execution while contemplating the completeness of your defeat. Your screams echo in chambers that once stored grain for your people's survival, the irony completing your transformation from provider to victim, whose suffering serves enemy entertainment rather than any constructive purpose. The cellar that supported life now hosts death, approaching through systematic destruction of everything that made existence meaningful. The realization that torture has extracted every secret worth knowing eliminates your final value to captors who no longer need information from someone whose political relevance ended with his capture. Tomorrow's dawn will bring either execution or creative torments designed more for enemy satisfaction than intelligence gathering, making death seem like the mercy it has become. Dawn's promise. Your execution is scheduled for the first light of dawn, when the assembled crowds of your former subjects can witness the final humiliation of a chieftain whose reign brought nothing but disaster to those who trusted his leadership. The executioner's block waits in the courtyard where you once held court, its blood-stained wood serving as monument to justice perverted into revenge by enemies who prefer spectacle to simple murder. The jeering throngs gather throughout the night as news spreads that the fallen chieftain will finally pay for his crimes against the natural order that kept Iceland peaceful before his disastrous ambitions unleashed years of warfare and suffering. Their faces show the cruel satisfaction of those who witnessed authority's collapse while surviving its consequences through submission to superior power. Magnus Red Hair addresses the crowd from the platform built specially for this occasion, his words cataloging your failures while justifying the execution as necessary cleansing of corruption that threatened regional stability. The speech transforms personal revenge into political necessity while providing legal framework that makes murder seem like justice served upon a deserving criminal. Your former thralls occupy the front rows, where they can best observe the death of someone whose authority once controlled every aspect of their existence, their presence serving as reminder that the oppressed often become the most enthusiastic witnesses when their oppressors face final judgment. The symmetry strikes you as perfect, even while you wait for dawn to bring death. Sigurd Blackbeard sharpens his massive two-handed sword, while describing the techniques he will use to ensure your death provides maximum entertainment for spectators who traveled from distant settlements to witness this historic moment. His professional pride in clean decapitation conflicts with crowd demands for suffering that prolongs the spectacle beyond simple execution. The night passes slowly as you contemplate the completeness of your fall, from respected leader to condemned criminal, whose death will serve as warning to future generations about the consequences of challenging established power through violence and ambition. Your execution becomes a lesson inscribed in blood for those who might consider similar attempts at political advancement. Enemy chieftains arrive before dawn to witness personally the elimination of a rival whose brief reign threatened their control over regional politics and trade networks. Their satisfied expressions reveal how thoroughly your destruction serves their interests, while demonstrating the futility of resistance against coordinated opposition that commands superior resources and patience. The crowd swells as sunrise approaches, their excitement building toward the climactic moment when your head will roll across stones still stained with your own blood, spilled during the interrogations that extracted every secret worth knowing. Their bloodlust transforms execution into festival, celebrating the restoration of natural order through elimination of disruptive elements. Your brother Eric Snakeeye arrives with his berserker retinue to claim the honor of witnessing your death personally, his presence completing the family tragedy that began with his exile for attempting to poison your father. His smile shows satisfaction at outliving the brother who inherited what he believed rightfully belonged to the eldest son by birthright. The executioner tests his blade against wooden practice blocks, while crowd noise grows louder in anticipation of violence that will conclude your story with finality that eliminates any possibility of future revenge or political resurrection. The sharp steel gleams in torchlight that illuminates faces eager for blood and suffering, that validates their decision to submit rather than resist. Dawn light creeps across the courtyard, where your death will serve multiple purposes: entertainment for bloodthirsty crowds, political messaging about the consequences of challenging established authority, and personal satisfaction for enemies whose patient plotting finally achieved complete victory over someone who dared rise above his designated station in life. Your final night ends with the realization that power's greatest illusion involves believing that authority can protect those who wield it from the consequences of their actions, when in reality, leadership only creates more enemies, while providing more spectacular methods for those enemies to achieve revenge against the ambitious fools who threaten their interests. The thrall's honor. Cormac the Irish thrall risks everything to free you from the execution chains, his calloused hands working with stolen keys while guards celebrate your impending death in the courtyard above. The same man whose hatred you witnessed during the slave rebellion now demonstrates that honor exists independently of social position, his courage shining brighter than any chieftain's gold arm rings or warrior's decorated sword. His whispered words in Gaelic carry the weight of shared suffering as he explains that some debts transcend political boundaries and personal grievances. No man should die like a dog in chains, even one who once held my chains, he says while his fingers work desperately to unlock shackles designed to hold the strongest warriors until their appointment with the executioner's blade. The bitter irony strikes you that salvation comes from someone you once considered property rather than person, his willingness to sacrifice his life for your freedom, proving that true nobility resides in actions rather than birthright or accumulated wealth. His courage makes your former authority seem petty and meaningless when measured against the honor he displays, despite having every reason to celebrate your destruction. Cormac's plan involves the drainage tunnels that carry waste from the hall's kitchen and sleeping chambers toward the river that flows beyond enemy patrol routes. The passage through filth and sewage offers humiliation worse than execution, but provides the only escape route that enemy guards failed to anticipate when positioning their forces around more obvious exits. His sacrifice becomes inevitable when guards discover your empty cell, their angry shouts echoing through corridors as they realize that someone must have provided assistance for the escape they believed impossible. Cormac's presence near the unlocked chains immediately identifies him as the traitor who chose honor over safety despite facing torture and death as consequences for his courage. The sound of his screams follows you through the drainage tunnels as enemy forces extract information about your escape route through methods that make your own recent torture seem gentle by comparison. His agony serves as testament to loyalty that survives even the cruel inversions of fortune that transform masters into fugitives and slaves into heroes. Your flight through sewage reduces the mighty chieftain to something lower than the thralls who once cleaned these same tunnels, the symbolic completion of your fall from power, now including literal descent into the waste products of civilization you once claimed to govern. The filth that covers your body serves as fitting garment for someone whose reign produced nothing but corruption. The tunnel exit deposits you into a drainage ditch beside the river, where dawn light reveals the extent of your degradation, covered in excrement and crawling like an animal through mud that represents the final stage of transformation from authority to something beneath contempt. Your escape succeeds at the cost of every remaining shred of dignity that might have survived capture and torture. Cormac's death screams fade behind you as you wade into icy water that numbs flesh while washing away the sewage that marked your passage through the underworld of your own making. His sacrifice purchased your freedom through suffering that demonstrates how completely your positions have reversed. The slave died with honor, while the chieftain lives with shame. The realization strikes that his loyalty exceeded anything you ever received from sworn warriors or blood relatives who abandoned you when political necessity made betrayal profitable. His courage reveals the moral bankruptcy of those who measure worth through wealth and status rather than character and integrity. The river current carries you downstream, while enemy search parties organize to recover their escaped prisoner. Their efforts complicated by your head start purchased through the blood and suffering of someone who owed you nothing, but chose to risk everything for principles that transcend political calculation or personal advantage. Your survival depends on reaching the fishing villages downstream before enemy riders can intercept your flight. The success of Cormac's plan now resting on your ability to swim through waters that threaten drowning as an alternative to recapture and inevitable execution that his sacrifice was designed to prevent through his own willing destruction. The rat's flight. You emerge from the sewage tunnels into daylight that illuminates your complete degradation, your body covered in human waste while you crawl through drainage ditches like a diseased animal fleeing the civilization that rejected your authority. The mighty chieftain, who once commanded respect from free men, now scuttles through filth that represents the moral corruption your reign brought to everything you touched. The transformation feels complete as you realize that your status has fallen below even the thralls who once cleaned these waste channels, their honest labor now seeming noble compared to the treachery and violence that marked your path to power. The sewage that coats your skin serves as fitting armor for someone whose leadership poisoned everything it was meant to protect. Your reflection in puddles of contaminated water shows a creature that bears little resemblance to the proud warrior who once wore gold arm rings and commanded armies. The face staring back reveals someone transformed by desperation into something that exists beneath human dignity, reduced to animal survival instincts that override any remaining pretense of honor or nobility. The irony burns like acid as you understand that your escape route through the waste systems mirrors the moral journey that brought you from respected chieftain to hunted fugitive, whose survival depends on crawling through the excrement of those you once ruled. The physical degradation completes the spiritual corruption that began with your first compromise of principle for political advantage. Enemy search parties organize above, while you navigate drainage channels that carry the waste products of normal life toward the river that offers possible salvation through continued flight. Their shouts echo through the tunnel systems as they discover the route that Cormac's sacrifice made possible, his death buying time measured in minutes while you flee toward uncertain refuge. The sewage burns cuts and wounds that cover your body from weeks of torture and rough treatment, each painful contact serving as a reminder that your flesh has become as corrupted as your soul through the choices that seemed necessary during your brief and disastrous reign. The physical pain pales beside the spiritual agony of understanding how completely you have failed everyone who trusted your leadership. Your progress through the drainage system requires crawling on hands and knees through passages designed for waste rather than human travel, The confined space, forcing intimate contact with filth that represents everything your authority produced during its brief existence. The claustrophobic tunnels become metaphor for the narrowing options that political failure creates for those who fall from power. Daylight appears ahead as the tunnel system approaches its outflow point near the river that flows beyond immediate enemy control. But the prospect of emerging into open country brings new fears about survival without resources, allies, or any form of protection, except continued flight through hostile territory where your description has made you marked for death. The sound of running water grows louder as you approach freedom, that comes at the cost of every dignity that once made life seem worth preserving. Your escape succeeding through methods that reduce chieftain status to something lower than the most degraded slave. Survival requires accepting humiliation that makes death seem preferable to continued existence. Your emergence into sunlight forces recognition that the person entering these tunnels no longer exists, replaced by something that shares physical form but lacks any connection to the noble aspirations that once motivated pursuit of power and authority. The chieftain died in the sewage, while something else crawls toward uncertain survival. The river beckons with promise of washing away the physical evidence of your degradation, but no amount of clean water can restore the dignity that your escape methods destroyed, along with every other form of worth that political ambition was meant to preserve and enhance through effective leadership. You wade into current that carries away sewage, while understanding that moral corruption cannot be cleansed through simple physical action, leaving you clean in body but forever marked by choices that transform protection into predation and authority into the systematic destruction of everything worth governing. The Brothers' Fury. Your brother Eric Snakeeye waits at the cliff's edge with his berserker warband, their foam-flecked mouths and blood-red eyes, promising that your flight ends here in violence that will satisfy his 3-year hunger for revenge against the brother who inherited what he believed belonged to him by right of birth. The axes raised in their scarred hands catch morning light, while reflecting the madness that transforms men into supernatural killing machines. So the mighty chieftain crawls from sewers like the rat he always was. Eric calls across the rocky outcropping, where retreat becomes impossible with only empty air and crashing waves behind you. His voice carries the bitter satisfaction of someone whose patient pursuit has finally cornered prey that once seemed untouchable through political authority and military protection. The berserkers spread across the narrow peninsula that juts into the churning sea, their tactical positioning revealing the same strategic competence that made Eric dangerous as ally before his exile for attempting to poison your father. His years of wandering have transformed hurt pride into systematic hatred, focused entirely on destroying the brother who stole his birthright. Their ritual preparation begins with the cutting and salt rubbing that renders them insensitive to pain, while enhancing their supernatural fury through techniques that cross the boundary between human and beast. The screams of self-inflicted agony tell you that these men have already died spiritually, leaving only killing machines animated by the desire for glorious death in combat. Your exhaustion from weeks of flight makes resistance hopeless against enemies who feel no pain and show no mercy to any living thing that stands between them and Valhalla's golden halls. The mathematics of confrontation reveal certain death whether you fight or attempt to escape through waters that promise drowning as alternative to dismemberment by berserker axes. Eric's transformation from beloved brother into executioner completes the destruction of family bonds that political ambition systematically corrupted through the pursuit of power that made enemies of those who should have remained allies. His exile created the hatred that now returns to claim final vengeance against someone whose success required destroying everything that once connected them. The berserkers worked themselves into killing frenzy, while you realize that brotherhood means nothing when measured against the resentments that ambitious men create through their rise to authority. Your brother's 3 years of exile provided time for hurt to ferment into murderous rage that no family connection can appease or redirect toward more worthy targets. You took what was mine by right, brother, he continues, while his men complete their preparations for assault that will sweep away your pathetic resistance like waves destroying sandcastles. Now I take what remains. Your life, your blood, your screams as payment for everything stolen from the rightful heir to father's authority. The sea crashes against rocks far below while offering the only escape route from enemies who prefer death to retreat and view your destruction as pathway to heroic legend worthy of saga preservation. The choice crystallizes between dismemberment by berserker axes or drowning in waters that promise cleaner death than what awaits on land. Your brother raises his massive two-handed axe while his berserkers echo his war cry with voices that have crossed beyond human sound into something that belongs to wolves and ravens rather than men who once shared hearthfires and childhood memories. Their approach eliminates time for negotiation or appeals to bonds that exile and ambition have already destroyed. The wind picks up from the sea while storm clouds gather on the horizon with unnatural speed that suggests divine intervention in mortal affairs. The gods perhaps taking interest in conflicts that have consumed entire bloodlines through the pursuit of authority that transforms brothers into executioners and love into the most personal form of hatred. Thunder rumbles across waters that churn with increasing violence, while lightning begins flickering through clouds that darken the sky despite the early hour. Nature itself seeming to prepare for intervention in human conflicts that have exceeded all bounds of reason and approached the supernatural through their systematic destruction of everything sacred, including family bonds and honor itself. Divine intervention. The storm strikes with supernatural fury that transforms the seascape into chaos of wind and lightning, while a Danish trading ship fights desperately against waves that drive it toward the jagged rocks below your clifftop confrontation. The vessel's hull groans against forces that no human seamanship can overcome, as the gods themselves seem to intervene in your final moments of mortal conflict. Lightning splits the sky with blinding intensity that sends your brother's berserkers staggering backward from the cliff edge, while thunder crashes with power that drowns their war cries and transforms supernatural fury into natural fear of divine forces beyond any earthly authority. The storm arrives with timing too perfect to be coincidence, suggesting that higher powers take interest in your desperate flight from earthly justice. The Danish ship's mainmast snaps like kindling under wind pressure that drives the vessel inexorably toward destruction on rocks that will provide your only possible escape route if divine timing continues to favor desperate survival over deserved punishment. The crew's screams mix with howling wind while their ship becomes your pathway to continued life through methods that seem to violate natural law. Eric Snakeeye orders his berserkers forward, despite the supernatural display that has already claimed 2 of his men through lightning strikes that leave smoldering corpses where warriors once stood. His determination to complete fraternal vengeance overrides even religious fear of divine intervention that appears designed to preserve your life through methods that exceed human understanding or planning. The ship's hull strikes rocks with tremendous impact that sends debris flying toward the cliff top, where you stand between certain death by berserker axes and possible survival through waters that boil with wreckage and drowning sailors. The vessel's destruction creates a bridge of floating timber that offers escape route requiring leap of faith into chaos that promises death through different means. Your brother's axe descends toward your head, while you throw yourself backward into empty air that separates clifftop from churning sea. the fall lasting long enough for prayer to whatever gods might preserve those who choose drowning over dismemberment as preferred method of dying with dignity intact, despite the circumstances that make death inevitable through either choice. The impact with icy water drives breath from your lungs, while ship debris provides handholds that prevent immediate drowning in waves that should crush human bones against rocks designed by nature to destroy rather than preserve life. Your survival through the initial plunge seems to violate laws that govern falling objects and their interaction with solid surfaces. Floating timber from the wrecked Danish ship creates a pathway away from rocks, while berserkers above hurl weapons that strike water around you with accuracy that suggests divine protection operates through deflecting trajectory rather than eliminating enemy skill. Their frustrated howls echo across waters that carry you beyond reach of earthly weapons, while demonstrating how completely supernatural intervention has altered the expected outcome. The storm drives you away from shore, while shipwreckage provides sufficient flotation to prevent drowning in waters that should have claimed your life within moments of impact. The Danish vessel's destruction becomes your salvation through timing that suggests divine attention to mortal affairs when they reach levels of desperation that exceed normal human endurance or possibility. Lightning continues striking cliff-top positions where your brother's berserkers retreat from supernatural forces that make their earthly fury seem insignificant by comparison. Their withdrawal marking the first time in your knowledge that Eric has abandoned pursuit of any goal he considered essential to his honor or survival. The gods have spoken with voices that even berserkers respect. Your survival through methods that violate natural expectation creates obligation to divine forces whose intervention preserved life that earthly justice had already condemned through processes that made death inevitable regardless of heroic resistance or desperate flight. The storm becomes your salvation while transforming escape into spiritual rather than merely physical survival. The wreckage that supports you in churning waters includes cargo and supplies that will enable continued survival if you can reach shore beyond your brother's immediate pursuit. Divine providence extending beyond simple preservation to include resources necessary for sustained life in exile from everything that once provided meaning and purpose to existence. Waters of redemption. The icy Atlantic threatens to claim your life 3 times during the desperate swim toward a distant fishing boat, whose crew works frantically to secure nets against storm winds that have transformed peaceful morning waters into chaos of waves and wreckage. Your exhausted limbs barely maintain motion through currents that should drag you beneath waves designed to eliminate rather than preserve those who dare challenge their power. Each stroke through frigid water burns muscles already weakened by weeks of torture and starvation, your body's reserves depleted to the point where continued swimming requires willpower that exceeds physical capability. The fishing vessel appears impossibly distant, while waves threaten to separate you from floating debris that provides temporary rest during the struggle toward possible salvation. The first near drowning occurs when ship timber shifts beneath your weight, sending you plunging into depths where dark water closes over your head with finality that seems to announce the end of your desperate flight from earthly justice. Only frantic clawing towards surface light preserves consciousness long enough to regain hold on wreckage that continues drifting toward the fishing boat. Danish cargo floats around you in the aftermath of divine intervention that destroyed one vessel while providing escape route toward another. The irony not lost that foreign merchants' losses become your pathway to continued existence through methods that suggest supernatural rather than natural preservation. Their misfortune enables your survival through timing that exceeds human planning. The second drowning attempt comes when powerful currents threaten to sweep you past the fishing vessel toward open ocean, where no human rescue becomes possible, and death through exhaustion seems inevitable. Your desperate swimming barely maintains position against forces that demonstrate how completely your survival depends on others' mercy rather than personal strength or skill. Simple fishermen aboard the approaching vessel show more humanity than any chieftain or warrior ever demonstrated. Their decision to risk storm conditions for the sake of a drowning stranger, revealing honor that transcends social position or political calculation. Their courage in dangerous waters proves that nobility resides in actions rather than inherited status or accumulated wealth. Strong hands grasp your arms while hauling you from waters that nearly claimed your life through methods that would have made divine intervention meaningless if human compassion had not completed the rescue that supernatural forces began. The fisherman's mercy transforms potential drowning into actual salvation through willingness to endanger themselves for someone they owe nothing. Your collapse onto rough wooden decking marks the end of flight that began with chieftain's authority and concludes with complete dependence on strangers whose simple goodness exceeds anything you achieved through political power or military strength. The fishing boat becomes sanctuary, where survival depends entirely on others' generosity rather than your ability to command or threaten. The storm that enabled your escape begins subsiding as divine intervention completes its purpose, leaving calm waters where chaos recently threatened to consume everything within reach of supernatural fury. The sudden peace suggests that higher powers have finished their work while leaving human beings to complete whatever healing remains possible after devastating conflicts. Your rescuers work with professional competence to secure their vessel against lingering storm effects, while asking no questions about your identity or the circumstances that required divine intervention to preserve your life. Their acceptance demonstrates wisdom that recognizes survival itself as sufficient justification for mercy, regardless of past actions or future intentions. The warmth of their rough wool blankets contrasts sharply with the cold reception you received from nobles and warriors whose political calculations made compassion impossible when measured against personal advantage. These simple men offer what chieftains could not: unconditional human kindness that expects nothing in return except recognition of shared mortality. Your breathing stabilizes while surrounded by the honest labor of people whose lives center on providing food for their families rather than accumulating power over others, their simple purposes revealing the emptiness of political ambition when measured against basic human needs for security, companionship, and meaningful work that serves constructive rather than destructive purposes. The captain's wisdom. The fishing boat's captain, a weathered man named Olaf Saltbeard, recognizes your scarred face and noble bearing despite the filth and exhaustion that mark your desperate flight from earthly justice. His calm assessment reveals neither fear nor judgment, only the practical wisdom of someone who has witnessed enough human folly to understand that survival creates obligations transcending past actions or social position. "I know who you are, fallen chieftain," he says while offering dried fish and clean water that taste better than any feast served at royal tables during your brief reign. His simple generosity demonstrates that true power lies not in commanding others, but in choosing to serve those who need help, regardless of whether they deserve salvation through previous actions. His crew follows their captain's lead without question or complaint, their acceptance proving that leadership based on example rather than authority creates loyalty that political power can never purchase through threats or promises. These men risk their lives daily to feed their families, making them understand courage in ways that warriors seeking glory can never comprehend. Olaf's boat carries the tools of honest labor: nets for catching fish, hooks for securing lines, knives for cleaning the harvest that feeds communities rather than armies. The simple implements shame your memories of decorated weapons designed for killing rather than creating, their practical purpose revealing how completely your pursuit of power divorced you from useful work. True strength comes from lifting others up rather than holding them down. The captain continues while his men work with competence, born from years of cooperation rather than fear. His philosophy emerged from necessity rather than noble birth, proving that wisdom develops through service rather than privilege or inherited status. The fishing crew shares their meager provisions without reservation, their generosity extending to someone who once held absolute power over life and death, but now depends entirely on strangers' mercy for continued existence. Their kindness reveals nobility of spirit that exceeds anything achieved through political maneuvering or military conquest. Olaf speaks of seasons and tides, weather patterns and fishing grounds, knowledge gained through decades of reading nature's signs rather than human deceptions that make political authority possible. His understanding of natural forces that no human can control or command provides perspective that puts earthly power into proper context. The captain's rough hands show scars from honest work, rope burns from handling nets, knife cuts from cleaning fish, calluses from gripping oars during storms. His wounds serve productive purposes rather than proving dominance over others, making them badges of honor more meaningful than any decoration awarded by grateful chieftains. His family depends on daily labor for survival, creating responsibility that makes leadership into service rather than privilege, obligation rather than opportunity for self-aggrandizement. The captain's authority emerges from competence and character, rather than inherited position or accumulated wealth that corrupts judgment through isolation from consequences. The simple truth of his words strikes deeper than any philosophy learned through formal education or political experience that taught manipulation rather than genuine understanding of human nature. His wisdom comes from necessity rather than leisure, making it more valuable than knowledge that serves only theoretical purposes. A man's worth shows in what he gives to others rather than what he takes for himself, Olaf concludes, while dawn light reveals distant smoke rising from your former territories. His observation encompasses everything your reign failed to achieve through methods that destroyed rather than preserved what made leadership worthwhile. The fishing boat continues its ancient work of harvesting food from dangerous waters, while you begin understanding that true power lies in serving others rather than dominating them, creating rather than destroying, building up rather than tearing down everything that stands between ambition and its ultimately hollow victories. Honest labor. Your first month as a fallen chieftain ends with dawn breaking over calm waters, while you work alongside Olaf's crew, mending nets with scarred hands that finally find peace in honest labor serving constructive rather than destructive purposes. The simple task requires patience and attention to detail that political maneuvering never taught, creating satisfaction that no victory over enemies ever provided. The fishing nets represent months of careful craftsmanship, designed to feed families rather than armies, their intricate weaving serving life rather than death through purposes that make labor meaningful beyond mere survival. Each repaired section strengthens tools that create rather than destroy, build rather than tear down everything worth preserving. Your fingers work with growing competence to tie knots that must hold under stress, learning skills that serve others rather than yourself through labor that creates value rather than simply redistributing wealth through violence or political manipulation. The simple work teaches lessons that years of education in statecraft never provided about the dignity of useful employment. Distant smoke rising from your former territories tells the story of enemies who now turn upon each other with the same fury they once directed against your authority, proving that hatred consumes everything, including those who wield it as a weapon. The destruction continues without your participation, revealing how unnecessary your leadership was to the cycle of violence that defines political power. Magnus Redhair burns Sigurd Blackbeard's hall, while Eric Snakeeye leads berserker raids against both of them. The alliance that destroyed you falling apart through greed and ambition that made cooperation impossible once the common enemy has been eliminated. Their civil war vindicates your downfall by demonstrating the self-destroying nature of power pursued through violence. The fishermen work with quiet competence that makes their labor into prayer, each motion serving purposes larger than individual survival through contribution to community welfare rather than personal aggrandizement. Their example teaches what leadership should accomplish: service that elevates others rather than dominance that corrupts both ruler and ruled. Your scarred hands tell stories of torture and degradation, but also of learning that true strength comes from endurance rather than dominance, service rather than command, building up rather than tearing down everything that makes civilization possible. The transformation from chieftain to fisherman represents not defeat, but redemption through discovering what actually matters. The morning sun illuminates faces marked by honest work rather than political scheming, their expressions showing satisfaction that comes from useful labor rather than the hollow pleasure of victory over enemies who are often created rather than discovered. Their contentment reveals what your reign destroyed through methods that made enemies of natural allies. Olaf's crew accepts your presence without question or judgment, their inclusion demonstrating that value comes from contribution rather than status, character rather than inherited position, service rather than the ability to command others through fear, or promises that cannot be kept when tested by circumstances beyond human control. The nets you help repair will feed children whose names you will never know, their nourishment representing your first positive contribution to human welfare since climbing from slave to chieftain through methods that served only selfish ambition disguised as noble purpose. The anonymous service provides satisfaction that political authority never offered. Your former enemies continue their mutual destruction while you work in peace beside men whose only ambition involves providing for their families through honest labor that creates rather than destroys, builds rather than burns, preserves rather than corrupts, everything touched by the pursuit of power for its own sake. The rhythm of mending work becomes meditation on what might have been if your climb from bondage had led towards service rather than domination, creation rather than destruction, building others up rather than holding them down through authority that ultimately destroyed everything it was meant to protect and preserve. As the sun climbs higher over peaceful waters, you understand that sometimes losing everything reveals what truly matters. Not the power to command others, but the opportunity to serve them. Not the ability to destroy enemies, but the chance to create something useful that outlasts the brief span of any individual life or reign. And so our chieftain's journey ends not in glory, but in grace. Not with conquest, but with wisdom earned through loss. You've witnessed the complete transformation from broken slave to fallen leader, from desperate ambition to peaceful acceptance of what truly matters, service to others rather than dominion over them. Congratulations on surviving this final chapter of brutality and redemption. The chieftain's crown proved heaviest of all burdens, its weight measured not in gold, but in the souls it crushed, while promising power that ultimately destroyed everything it touched. But if you've made it this far, if you've endured all 5 episodes of our Viking survival saga, then you've completed an extraordinary journey through every level of medieval society. From the thrall's chains to the farmer's desperate gamble, from the trader's golden burden to the warrior's bloody honor, and finally to the chieftain's poisoned throne. You've experienced the complete ladder of ambition and its ultimate cost. 30 days each, 150 days total of survival, struggle, and the slow understanding that climbing higher often means falling farther when the inevitable collapse comes. You've learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what actually matters in this brief span we call life. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the harsh realities of Viking Age Iceland. Your dedication to the complete story honors the memory of those who lived these struggles for real in a world far more brutal than our own. If this tale of ambition and redemption helped ease your mind toward restful sleep, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more immersive stories, crafted specifically for relaxation and peaceful slumber. We have many other perfectly crafted tales waiting for you. Each story is designed to guide your mind away from daily worries toward the peaceful darkness where dreams begin and rest finally comes to those who need it most. Sleep well, survivor. You've earned it.